So I'd like to show you an adult approach to dessert, an approach that doesn't deal with caramel and too much sweetness, lots of chocolate, ooey gooey icing, but instead an adult's appreciation of perfectly ripe fruit, just enough sweetness to make it taste good, and then finally some high-proof alcohol. I'm going to be making something called bachelor's jam. It starts with fruit, and this is the perfect time of the year. Here we are at the beginning of summer, and you can see the ripe berries. I've got raspberries and blackberries. I've got red currants, which are available for just a short time, and I love them. They're nice and tart. Blueberries and ripe peaches and nectarines. I'm going to take this fruit, and I'm going to combine it here in a bowl. And for every pound of fruit, typically, I add about a cup of sugar. So I have sugar here. You may decide that more sugar is appropriate when you have a lot of currants, which are very, very acidic and sharp, or maybe slightly less. But I always come back to about a cup per pound. So we'll add the sugar. And this is looking like we're making jam right now. But here's where we veer off in a very different direction. We're going to cover this fruit with a high-proof alcohol, something 80 proof or more. Think about things like rum or kirsch or eau de vie, even vodka, brandy, cognac, armagnac. All of those things are appropriate. I've got some brandy right here, and I'm going to add this, and I'm going to cover the fruit. Now, this needs to set aside for, I would say, a minimum of 2 or 3 weeks. The fruit will flavor the spirits, but the spirits will preserve the fruit. You don't have to worry about refrigerating this. I usually keep it in canning jars and just put it on the shelf in my pantry. 2 or 3 weeks is about as early as you want to go and try it. So let me set this aside, and I'll show you what I have here. Here's some bachelor's jam I made a little bit earlier. This was wrapped in tissue as a gift. It's been sitting on my pantry shelf now for about 3 weeks, and you can see that the fruit has colored the spirits. This is good to go just the way it is. I could take this right here with a spoon, go sit on the couch, and before you know it, the whole thing would be gone. But let me show you some things with a little bit of refinement. First, I've got some Greek yogurt right here. And if you're concerned about your health, maybe your dessert begins with Greek yogurt, and then you dip out some of this fruit and the spirits that go along with it, and you add that right on top of the yogurt. I'm going to put a little texture in the form of some toasted almonds. And that is a very simple way to use bachelor's jam. But let me show you something a little bit more fancy. I've got a big dish like this, and what I'm going to do is put a dollop of cream in the bottom of that dish. This is whipped cream, sweetened with a little bit of vanilla in it. And again, I'm going to take the bachelor's jam, and I'll put that around the cream so that you can see the beautiful color. There's a great aroma that comes off this bachelor's jam. And then I've got some angel food cake, and I'll just put a couple of pieces right in there. We'll clean things up a little bit. And there's a second idea. And then finally, I'm going to make a little parfait with this bachelor's jam. It will begin with the fruit ladled into the bottom of an Irish coffee mug. If you wanted a layer of granola in here as well, you could certainly do that. Again, don't be shy about including the liquid as well. And on top, a little dollop of cream. And make sure you've got a nice long iced teaspoon. And there's 3 very simple desserts that you can use with one preparation that you have on hand in your pantry. Now, before I leave this idea, as you use this up, if more berries become available, add them, put a little bit of sugar, top it off with spirits, and this jam never has to end. It can go on and on and on, and you don't have to worry about it because the high-proof alcohol is a great preservative. Bachelor's jam, 3 really fun preparations. Next, I'd like to show you another way to use Bachelor's jam in what I've always called a summer pudding. They make it in England, and it's made at the height of the season when the berries are abundant. So, first thing we need to do is make a compote of this fruit. And the way I like to begin is with some caramelized sugar. Now, I've got a pan that's hot here already, and we're going to sprinkle the sugar into it. This is about 9 ounces of sugar. I'm going to turn it up full blast, but already you can see in the hot pan the sugar beginning to melt. First it melts, and then shortly afterwards you'll see it start to color. You have to stir it full time, and if you can get all of this sugar to melt at once, that's the ideal. That way you don't get some sugar browning and other sugar yet to melt. It melts at about 300 degrees. And shortly after that, it will begin to brown. And as it browns, as it caramelizes, you'll start to get a much fuller, richer flavor. As you can see now, the sugar is almost completely melted, and off to the sides, we're starting to see some browning. We want it to brown evenly, so stir that hot sugar into the rest of the mass so that it browns evenly. Now, as it begins to brown, you'll notice first sort of a golden color, and then the golden will give way to a little bit of brown color, and I want to continue to cook it until I see it just start to become reddish. That tells me that the flavor will be more than just sweet. It'll have a little bit of bitterness and a full complexity. If at any point it seems to be going too quickly, you can easily pull it off the heat. There's plenty of heat inherent in this sugar to keep it browning. I want to have on hand some red wine, because as soon as this gets to the point where I don't want it to cook any longer, I need to bring the temperature down with the introduction of a little bit of liquid. If you notice, there's a little bit of smoke coming off the pan. That's another sign that we're very close to where we want to be. Now, when you add liquid to this hot sugar, be a little bit careful. You can expect a big puff of steam. Here we go. Now, that molten sugar immediately firmed up again, but it will continue to cook and it will dissolve little by little. I'm going to add all of these berries to this liquid. So there's blackberries and some strawberries, there's blueberries, I've got raspberries as well, and we'll put them all in, and I want to cook them until they begin to come apart a little bit, until they soften and give up their juice. There's a couple more hiding out. In terms of flavoring, beyond the flavor of the red wine and the caramel, I've got a cinnamon stick or two that I'm going to add, and just a single clove. This can easily be a pinch of powdered cloves if that's all you've got. And we'll set that on the heat to simmer. While it comes up to a simmer, I'm going to add an entire pint of bachelor's jam. This will take maybe 10 minutes to simmer and for the fruit to give up its flavor. I'm not going to take the time to do it now, but this is what you can expect to have after it's cooked for about 10 minutes. And it's worth tasting it. It has a full, rich fruit flavor. It's reduced just slightly. I'm a big fan of just a pinch of salt into desserts, which I think gives you a nice round flavor. And so we're ready to move on to the next part of summer pudding. Summer pudding is these berries mixed with stale bread. Actually, that's it. And I'm going to take a bowl, something about this size, and I'm going to take bread that I've cut the crusts from, and I'm going to line the bowl with bread. If you cut it into little wedges, typically it behaves pretty well. It doesn't have to fit perfectly. You can even tear the bread into pieces that you think are just about the right size. Now that we have the outside of it all lined, I'm going to bring it over here and we're going to introduce some of this fruit. And don't be shy about adding the juice as well. As this bread absorbs the juice, it will turn this wonderful deep color. But more than that, the bread will swell and all the little gaps will fill in. Next, I'm going to add a second layer of bread. And because this is on the inside, you can just piece it together with what you have on hand, little bits and pieces of bread. And having made a second layer of bread, top it with more fruit. Again, make sure that you're generous with the juices. Another layer of bread, just piece it together. Fill in the blanks. This shouldn't be something that makes you crazy. It should be very, very easy to do. One more layer of fruit. And then finally, I usually take some big slices of bread like this so that I can piece together a lid that will fit. And it has to span the bowl, and it has to be roughly semicircular. And that is that. Now, this can get a little bit messy. You need enough liquid in this so that all the bread can absorb the flavorful juices and begin to swell. I like to put it in a larger bowl in case the juices spill over. And then top it with a generous amount of the fruit and the juice that the fruit is in. Having it on a second plate like this means that if it does spill over, it's not the end of the world. Don't be stingy with the juice at all, because you want the bread to be completely soaked with that juice. Now, once this has a chance to absorb a little bit, I'm going to put a plate on top, and then usually I press it with a can of tomato juice or a can of tomatoes. I have one here. I'm going to bring it over, and I will put this plate on top. You can see it spill over, no problems. I'm going to put that on top, and we'll set it aside. And let's see what we've got. So first, I'll take this plate off. I'm going to set it aside. You can see that some spilled over, that the bread has turned completely purple. And what I'd like to do is unmold this. And the safe way is to take this plate and put it upside down on top of the summer pudding. I'll take this away, and then we'll flip the entire thing, and you may discover that as the bread swells, it forms a little bit of a seal. So you may have to go in and just break the vacuum. Put a knife or a spoon between the edge, and there we go. Just so that it's a little more attractive, I like to glaze it with some of this fruit. So save a little bit. Typically there's more than enough. And you can present it like this, with a little cream and maybe just a leaf or two of mint. If you're curious to see what the summer pudding looks like on the inside, let me just cut a quick slice. Have a sharp knife. And cut yourself a wedge. You know, there's some people that don't really care for sweet desserts. And for those folks, oftentimes I will break out a really nice piece of cheese. So I thought it would be interesting to take a look at a couple of different cheeses and things that you might pair with them. So let's get started. We already have the Bachelor jam that we made earlier. The thing about this Bachelor jam is that it's wonderfully aromatic and fruity, and that's because of the alcohol that's in there. It's so volatile, it just carries that aroma right up to your sniffer. So I like to pair that Bachelor's jam with a cheese that's equally aromatic. And what I have here is the big stinker of the cheese world. This is a wash rind cheese. Limburger is wash rind cheese. Real Munster cheese is a wash rind cheese. Epoisse is a wash rind cheese. When they make these cheeses and reach the point where they need to be aged, they bathe the outside in liquid, which creates the perfect environment for a particular bacteria that grows red like this, or pink or orange, and it's very, very aromatic. What's surprising is that as aromatic as the cheese is, the paste is much more mild. So pairing these two things with one another, to me, seems like a match made in heaven, and I would encourage you to try it. The cheese I have here is one called Red Hawk. It's a local cheese, local wash rind cheese, but if you go to a cheese store and ask for almost any wash rind cheese, I think you'll be on the right track. Let me set this aside, and I'm going to move something over here. I've got another accompaniment that I love with salty aged cheeses. It's a pineapple and banana butter, and I'm going to show you quickly how to make it. What I have here is pineapple and ripe banana. those have been cut up and peeled and put into the blender and just pureed. So I'm going to add it to this big flat pan. I also have here some brown sugar, which I would mix with water and just heat until it dissolved, and then that would go in as well. And then finally, I would add a couple of cinnamon sticks and a good deal of lime zest. Now, what we're making here is akin to an apple butter, save for the fact that it's pineapple and banana instead of apple. I'm going to take this and I would put it into the oven at a low temperature, between 250 and 300 degrees, and cook it long and slow. It will take about 3 hours. But let me bring over one that's nearly done and give you a chance to take a look at it. So as you can see, the volume is reduced. If you want to make sure to scrape the sides, it won't burn on the sides. It's begun to caramelize, so I'm getting that full flavor. But I think of this as about 5/6 of the way done. If you look at this jar, I made this last week, and you can see the deep, dark color of this particular version. It reminds me of the color of apple butter, or sort of a deep, russety mahogany color. By getting that level of caramelization, we get a very, very full flavor, and that's exactly what you want. So this one right here would have to be stirred and put back into the oven probably for another 20 minutes or so. As it gets close to being done, you have to watch it very, very carefully because it can burn easily. Once it's cool, evaluate its consistency. If it feels a little bit thick or sticky to you, you can always add a little water and thin it out. Now, what do you do with it? Well, as I said, I love it with aged cheeses. So, as an example, I have an aged Gouda. This is a goat's milk Gouda called Midnight Moon. And the combination of this salty cheese that has a little bit of a caramely flavor to it and a lot of savory overtones, and then this fruit butter is spectacular. I don't even reach for bread. I just put the cheese with a little bit of the fruit butter on it and give it a shot. That is so complex and delicious. You will come back to that combination again and again and again. Finally, I'm going to offer one more cheese course. I think of this cheese course as the best candy bar you ever ate. So I have some toasted hazelnuts, and here is a piece of blue cheese. And to accompany those two things, I'm going to cut just a little bit of honeycomb. Now, you don't have to find honeycomb, but if you can, I would say that would be great. And we'll put those three things together on the plate. I would encourage you to eat them all three in tandem with one another. And when you get the combination right, you'll have the salty, savory, creamy qualities of the cheese side by side with the aromatic honey that is sweet and complex. And then finally, the crunch and the roastiness of the nuts. And the first time you taste it, you'll recognize that there's something really great going on. But what's really fun and really intriguing is that you can pair your next bite to match your particular taste. Next time, maybe more honey or more cheese or an extra hazelnut. This is license to play with your food, even though you're an adult. So let me put that there. A lot of people like wine with their cheese. And I would tell you that wine and cheese is not as easy as you might think. There's plenty of reasons that wine and cheese go well together, but there's plenty of reasons where they don't. As an example, maybe the cheese coats your palate and the wine can't get through. Or maybe the cheese has so much savory flavor that it just makes the wine seem awkward and strong. There is one style of wine that I think is almost foolproof, bomb-proof when you're pairing it with cheese, and that is dessert wines. And so I have two right here. The first is an ice wine, where the fruit is actually frozen, and that concentrates the sugars and gives you a sweet, concentrated, dense flavor. Think of it like cheese, which is concentrated milk. And then here, a botryticized wine, where a particular mold infects the grapes, and it gives you wonderful concentration of fruit flavor and new flavors like honey that weren't there before. These wines do really wonderful things with cheese courses. When we return with our next lesson, we're going to carry on with wine and see what we can learn about the interaction of wine and food.